To the public, Bishop N.L. Jones seems to embody success. He leads a thriving megachurch and reaches thousands with his powerful words. But behind the scenes, he faces battles that few would ever suspect. His challenges are far deeper than what's shared in sermons or captured on television. What hidden struggles weigh on Bishop Jones? What does it take to inspire others while grappling with your own pain? Join us as we reveal a side of Bishop Jones that few have glimpsed. A heavy legacy. A heartbreaking event has rocked Bishop Jones's world, leaving everyone stunned. Known for his powerful sermons and inspiring ministry, he has touched many lives. His journey hasn't been easy, especially with the intense pressure that comes from living in the spotlight. Bishop Jones was born in Spanish Town, Jamaica. He grew up in a family known for both faith and achievement. His father, Bishop Robert W. Jones, was a leader in politics and the church, shaping young NL's beliefs and future. And he wasn't the only famous name in the family. His sister, Grace Jones, rose to global fame as a singer and actress, known for her bold style and fierce personality. With such a family, expectations were high for NL from an early age. When he was a teenager, the family moved to Syracuse, New York, in search of new opportunities. This change was a turning point. While Grace headed into the world of Hollywood, he felt a calling toward ministry. Yet, he couldn't escape the weight of his family's legacy. His father's role as a church leader added to the pressure. The Jones family lived under a public eye, with the community watching every decision, every choice. From where Bishop Jones studied to how he lived his life was held against his father's reputation. When he took over Greater Bethany Community Church in Los Angeles in 1994, the scrutiny only grew. Leading a large congregation seemed like a path to fulfillment, but he found the public's expectations could feel like a cage. Every sermon, every appearance, every word was watched and sometimes misunderstood. Despite following in his father's path, recent events have shaken Bishop Jones's life in ways no one expected. Behind the scenes, he faces struggles that go beyond what anyone sees, as the weight of family expectations continues to be a complex and challenging part of his journey. Family strains. Bishop Jones was fully committed to his church, but his family life was another story. His bond with his siblings, especially Grace, was complicated. They loved each other deeply, but their lives took different directions. Grace was bold, outspoken, and a star in the entertainment world. He was a man of faith, grounded in the values of the church. Their opposing lifestyles often led to tension, and he found himself torn, wanting to support his family, while also staying true to his beliefs. The passing of his brother Chris hit him hard. Chris was more than just a sibling. He was a creative soul and a spiritual companion. The loss shook Bishop Jones deeply, and he struggled to balance his grief with his role as a leader. His heart felt heavy, not just from sorrow, but perhaps something more. Was he carrying a burden too big, or was his health also at risk? A heart burdened. From the outside, Bishop Jones's life seemed glamorous, but behind closed doors, he carried a heavy heart and a mind full of burdens. Leadership, personal health battles, and the isolation that often comes with great responsibility took a toll on him every day. The bishop had a heart condition, something he kept mostly private, but stress only worsened it. Doctors urged him to slow down, to let go of some of his duty, but his devotion to the church and its people kept him pushing forward. Each day, he was faced with endless needs and endless requests. Commitment isn't about the object, it's about me, he once confessed. I've got some things I need to work on. Managing a church of tens of thousands, delivering powerful sermons, and constantly traveling to speak at events meant that rest became a distant dream. For him, ministry wasn't just a Sunday obligation. It was a daily commitment to be there for the broken, the lost, and the searching. People brought him their pain and struggles, hoping he'd have the answers they needed. But when it came to his own burdens, he turned only to God, the one he relied on when the weight became too much to bear. Though he led as a spiritual giant, Bishop Jones was all too human. Beneath the powerful sermons and unwavering faith, he carried fears, failures, doubts, and weaknesses few ever saw. Many looked up to him as a larger-than-life figure, but inside, he was waging silent battles that few could imagine. His health issues hadn't just appeared out of nowhere. Years of relentless stress, of being everything to everyone, wore down his body. Eventually, he was diagnosed with atrial flutter, a heart rhythm disorder that needed immediate medical care. Doctors recommended an ablation, a procedure to stabilize his heartbeat. The treatment worked for a time, but it didn't get to the heart of the issue. For years, he brushed off his body's warning signs, pushing them aside to meet the constant demands of his role. There was always another sermon to prepare, another person in need, another crisis to manage. In his mind, he could always lean on his faith to see him through. Yet even his faith couldn't shield him from the physical toll of pushing himself beyond his limits. The bishop was driven by his calling, feeling compelled to continue serving. But at what cost? The weight of his responsibility was enormous, and it pressed down on him every day. The cost of leadership. Leading isn't easy, and for Bishop Jones, it came with intense challenges. When he stepped into Greater Bethany Community Church in June 1994, he was already taking on a monumental task. The church was large, with around 1,000 members, but under his guidance, it grew into something far greater, a congregation of 17,000. This wasn't just growth, it was a movement. Each Sunday, thousands filled the church pews, and thousands more tuned in to his sermons online and through broadcasts. For countless followers, he was more than a pastor. He was a lifeline, a beacon of hope. But this influence came with an enormous burden. He felt the weight of responsibility, the constant demand to inspire, lead, and uplift without fail. The pace was unrelenting. His days were crammed with meetings, services, and obligation. He traveled the world to preach, attend conferences, and share his message. Outwardly, he seemed tireless, a leader with boundless energy. But inside, he was struggling to keep up. The constant demands left him with little time to care for himself. Slowly, his health began to deteriorate. His heart, already weakened, took a turn for the worse. Doctors warned him about the dangers of stress and exhaustion, urging him to slow down. But how could he? His congregation needed him. So did the thousands who looked to him for wisdom and guidance. With every new follower, every speaking engagement, the weight of his role grew heavier. Bishop Jones was carrying it all, yet he knew each step forward came with an unseen cost. His church became a light for thousands, a place of refuge and hope. People from every background came to hear him speak, drawn to his words and the way he made faith feel personal and real. But with success came mounting expectation. The more lives he touched, the higher the stakes. Each message had to be as powerful as the last. Each choice had to be flawless. With so many eyes on him, he couldn't afford to falter. The pressure to be on at all times was exhausting. He couldn't let his congregation down. They relied on him for strength and guidance. Yet, the harder he pushed to meet their needs, the more he felt like he was losing himself. Yes, he was a leader, but he was also just a man, one with his own doubts, fears, and limits. Despite standing before a sea of faces every Sunday, he often felt isolated. He was surrounded by people seeking his counsel, but few understood the burden he carried. The solitude of leadership weighed on him. People expected him to have it all figured out, to be connected to God in a way that left no room for doubt or struggle. But even pastors have dark nights of the soul. Even they need someone to lean on. Yet, in his position, finding someone who truly understood was nearly impossible. The emotional toll of that loneliness ran deep. He had friends, he had family, but sometimes it felt like no one could fully comprehend the crushing responsibility on his shoulders. In building a life dedicated to helping others, he had at times forgotten to care for himself. Leadership made him a figure people could depend on, but it also placed him in a lonely place. He wrestled with his own struggles while carrying the weight of others' needs. Now, as his personal life was thrust into the spotlight, Bishop Jones faced a daunting question. Could he continue to lead when his own world was under scrutiny? A private life under the spotlight. Being a public figure came with a relentless spotlight. Every part of his life was scrutinized. His choices, his relationships, even his health. The media, his congregation, and countless online critics seemed to have endless opinions opinions on his life. There was always someone with something to say about how he should live, what he should prioritize, and who he should associate with. His longtime friendship with Loretta was a frequent target for public speculation. He'd known her for nearly 2 decades, and while they were undeniably close, people couldn't understand why they weren't married. Many questioned the nature of their bond, believing there had to be more to it than just friendship. The rumors circulated endlessly, feeding a constant cycle of speculation. To him, friendship was pure, a relationship built on years of trust, mutual respect, and shared experiences. But to the public eye, their connection needed to fit into a predefined mold, and anything outside that was up for debate. He tried to make it clear 2 people could have a meaningful bond without it being romantic. But despite his reassurances, the rumors persisted, and his relationship with Loretta became one more piece of his life that was out there for everyone to dissect. This personal scrutiny intensified when he joined the reality TV show Preachers of LA. He felt that showing the real human side of a pastor's life could help people see the struggles and sacrifices behind the sermon. Some praised his openness, viewing it as an act of transparency that broke down the rigid walls often surrounding faith leaders. But others saw it differently. Some accused him of courting fame, of straying from his calling to follow worldly pursuits. They questioned his motives, believing that a man of faith had no place on a platform that didn't always emphasize the spiritual side of things. Every move he made was analyzed, with critics waiting for any sign of weakness to pounce on. In many ways, the show brought his personal challenges into sharper focus. Suddenly, his friendships, his decisions, his way of leading, and even his faith were part of a public narrative. Every episode seemed to bring fresh waves of opinions, some supportive, some harshly critical. He found himself having to defend his choices not just to strangers, but to people he had never met. It felt like no matter how much he tried to do right, there was always someone ready to misunderstand or misjudge. The constant scrutiny only added to the weight he carried as a leader. The rumors around Loretta lingered. Questions about why they weren't married kept resurfacing, and the expectations he faced were relentless. He was, after all, a pastor. People expected him to rise above it all, to be immune to the trials that plagued ordinary people. Yet he was human, and the pressure to explain, to justify, to hold everything together was a heavy load to bear. And through it all, he was still a pastor, with a massive congregation that looked to him for strength and guidance. The people he served didn't want to see a leader weighed down by rumors and judgment. They wanted him to be strong, to inspire them to have faith despite the struggles. But behind the strength he showed to the world was a man constantly questioning if he could meet these endless expectations. Balancing the demands of leadership with his personal life was a challenge that few understood. Even fewer realized the toll it took on him. Was it possible for a spiritual leader to find peace and balance when the world expected him to be unbreakable? Balancing expectations. Balancing the expectations of a congregation with his own needs was one of Bishop Jones's greatest struggles. People saw him as their spiritual guide, a pillar of strength, someone always wise, calm, and available. They relied on him, leaning into his words, drawing strength from his teachings. But behind the pulpit and beyond the lights, he was still a man. He needed rest and time to recharge, like anyone else. Yet, he found it nearly impossible to take that time for himself. In his mind, rest felt like a luxury he couldn't afford, a detour from his calling, and so he soldiered on, day after day, ignoring his own needs in order to meet the expectations of others. Self-care, for him, was a complicated concept. It felt selfish, even indulgent. He had dedicated his life to serving God and his congregation, and he struggled with the idea of stepping back, even momentarily, to care for himself. Over time, though, the toll was undeniable. The pressure of carrying the weight of so many, the endless demands, the constant public scrutiny, all of it began to wear him down. Physically, he felt it in every ache, every sleepless night. Mentally, it was as if he were constantly stretched thin, with no room left to breathe. But the hardest part, perhaps, was how it affected him spiritually. As a pastor, he was used to preaching about faith, about trusting God's plan. He spoke to others about finding strength in times of trial, about holding on when life got hard, but in his darkest moments, he felt the cracks in his own faith. He wondered if he was truly on the right path. The responsibilities he carried, the endless expectations, it all made him question if he was where he was supposed to be. These were thoughts he rarely admitted, even to himself, and certainly not to others. To do so felt like a failure, like he was letting down the people who saw him as their beacon of hope. It wasn't just his professional life that was in turmoil. His health and personal life bore the brunt of his relentless dedication too. The stress seemed to show up everywhere, in his body, his mind, his spirit. The weight of it all sometimes felt insurmountable. He felt like he was being crushed under the expectations of the world. Yet even in those moments of deep struggle, he kept his faith, though sometimes it was only by a thread. He reminded himself that God had a purpose for him, even if it wasn't clear. He clung to the belief that his struggles, as painful as they were, could serve as a lesson that even spiritual leaders are human. Even they have moments of doubt and weakness. Through it all, he found himself caught in the paradox of being both a leader and a human. He was expected to be unwavering, yet he felt vulnerable. The congregation needed him to be strong, but sometimes he barely had the strength to carry himself, and the guilt that came with feeling so drained only added to his burden. He felt that, as a pastor, he should be above this, that his faith should protect him from the challenges that weighed so heavily on him. In those quiet, solitary moments, he faced the reality that he needed help too, that he wasn't immune to struggle. But who could he turn to? As a leader, it wasn't easy to open up about his fears and frustrations. People assumed he had it all figured out, that his connection with God was unbreakable. But faith, he realized, wasn't a constant state of peace. It was something he had to hold on to, even when it felt like slipping away. Bishop Jones's journey wasn't just a story of faith, it was a story of resilience. He had built his life on serving others, but in doing so, he sometimes forgot to take care of himself. The pressure, the loneliness, the physical toll, these were all the hidden costs of a life dedicated to leadership. He kept going, not because it was easy, but because he believed in his purpose, even when that purpose seemed clouded. The unforeseen tragedy. In 2013, Bishop Jones found himself called to support a community facing unimaginable heartbreak. A tragedy had shaken the Tabernacle of Praise Worship Center in Lake Charles, Louisiana, when Pastor Ronald Harris was tragically shot and killed during a church service by former deacon Woodrow Carey. The murder, rooted in a painful love triangle, sent shockwaves through the congregation and drew national media attention. Bishop Jones, known for his compassion and steady leadership, saw an opportunity to help a grieving community find healing. Stepping up in a time of sorrow, he joined forces with fellow preacher Dietrich Haddon to organize a two-night revival at the church. They aimed to offer spiritual renewal and comfort to a congregation devastated by loss. The event was captured for preachers of LA, not to sensationalize the tragedy, but to document the community's path toward resilience and recovery. Bishop Jones approached the revival with genuine empathy, staying focused on the people's need for healing rather than the painful details of the event. Although he hadn't known Pastor Harris personally, Jones reached out to the pastor's widow, extending heartfelt condolences and support in her darkest hour. In that moment, Bishop Jones wasn't just a leader within his own congregation, he became a source of strength for an entire community in mourning. He set aside his own struggles to bring peace to others, embodying the role of a spiritual healer who could guide people through their most painful days. His compassion reminded everyone of the power of faith, unity, and resilience, even after an unimaginable loss. Through his work with the Tabernacle of Praise community, Bishop Jones saw that his calling went beyond any single church or pulpit. He knew that his mission was to be there for others, especially in times of tragedy. It was a difficult journey, yet it strengthened his commitment to serve and deepen his empathy for those around him. In recent years, this newfound understanding has inspired Bishop Jones to make essential changes in his own life. He's begun to focus on his health and well-being, taking time to recharge and set boundaries. Recognizing that he cannot pour from an empty cup, he now embraces the importance of self-care, knowing it allows him to to serve others more fully. It's been a difficult, ongoing journey, but one that's shown him there's always room for healing and growth, even in the face of life's most challenging moments. With his faith stronger than ever, Bishop Jones is moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose. He knows his life's work is to guide, inspire, and uplift those in need. And by balancing his own needs with his calling, he's learning that true leadership isn't about carrying every burden alone. It's about finding the strength to lift others, even while nurturing your own spirit. Through every struggle, he's reminded that faith can carry him through and that renewal is always possible.